Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me.
So, what is this thing we call reality? It's a question more and more people are asking, and it would appear more and more convenient explanations are emerging nearly every day. But it would seem that reality isn't quite what everyone thought it to be. And the reason for this documentary, where we'll explore the facts rather than the fiction being presented by the many varied sources.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
The Matrix.
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
We do not live in a matrix. The origin of the word is matriarch. It refers to the female oracle. It is her plan, not the architect, or Neo or Smith, that sets in motion everything that follows. The computer aspect of the word matrices is secondary, which strengthens the technological aspect of the film and makes for a far better title. The Matrix supports the virtual world ideology, taken from the new science religion known as scientism, based on faith and unproven theory rather than fact. We'll go into that later. However, the important aspect is that the film parallels our own reality in many ways, and is by no means any accident. As we do not live in a virtual world, there would have to be some other form of mechanism influencing and manipulating our existence. And while ours does not stem from any kind of machine mind, there are certain elements in this reality that would like us to believe it does.
We've become bored with watching actors give us phony emotions. We're tired of pyrotechnics and special effects. While the world he inhabits is, in some respects, counterfeit, there's nothing fake about Truman himself. No scripts, no cue cards. It isn't always Shakespeare, but it's genuine.
Let's start with the basics, with those facts we think we know and believe to be true. Hang on, let's just see that again. So what does the origin of a word have to do with anything? We all know what a thing is. It's an inanimate object or something as yet to be explained or defined. So imagine a bridge that didn't take into consideration the load and stress it was likely to endure during its lifespan. We all know what happens in those instances. Well, words, despite being apparently insignificant, have the same careful precision and design behind them, and are selected not only to allow communication and portray a specific image, but are also geared to attach a subliminal command response. Words like stop, go, danger, poison, warning, exit, caution, amongst many, many more. Even our own name is a subliminal conditioned response, so that on a page of 100 names, it will magically leap off the page before our very eyes, simply by scanning it. Yet to anyone else, it remains completely invisible and obscured. The same as in a room full of people, with the sound of the name enough of a trigger to activate a subliminal attention response over all the background noise, even if we're paying very little attention. Where we hear or see the word, and our brain automatically and subliminally acknowledges not only its meaning, but also any required immediate action or response. The same then applies with the word reality, as we've been repeatedly conditioned from an early stage to subliminally accept the current association with all the aspects of our daily lives, automatically and without question or doubt. We therefore know what real and reality are supposed to mean because we've been conditioned to accept them. The origin shows us what the original intended concept of a word was, where subsequent amendments and additions simply obscure the original purpose. Is it important? Well, imagine if they told us they went to the moon but lied. Is there any change in the grand scale of things? No, but it would nonetheless still be a lie and a massive deception. The same then applies with words, because it shows deliberate intent to obscure the truth. And truth is usually obscured when there is something to hide. Based on the origin, before the 1400s, nothing was real. And before the 1540s, there was no reality. And there's the thing, literally. Because the thing we now know as an unknown quantity was originally defined as a form of authority, which apparently transferred the meaning so that a new word could be created that would quantify and categorize anything as either real or unreal, depending on the determination and agreement of that same authority. To that end, it took the word real and added ITY, which denotes the state or condition of being. To create a vessel capable of holding everything the authority determines to be worthy of inclusion, under the banner of real, while discarding everything else it considers unnecessary or inconvenient, tying the two words irrevocably together, while the original thing was then obscured and changed into the unknown quantity we know today. From that point on, the new reality and its contents could only continue to exist so long as some form of legislative body remained to determine its limits and boundaries using its authority. And where does the origin of authority come from? Therefore, the legislative body, as the new authority, becomes the author and the creator. So, just like the matrix, which is created by the architect and manufactured by the machine mind, this reality is created by the author, which would mean that reality cannot possibly be our own. Granted, everyone exists within that construct, which they believe is theirs to do with as they please. But as we'll see, it is the author and the mechanism that really maintains and controls our lives. And if we require proof, then one need look no further than the definitions themselves, because a thing now remains a thing until it is defined, categorized, and acknowledged as real, where it is accepted and then added into reality, with everything else simply dismissed, relegated into myth or fiction, ridiculed, categorized as some form of conspiracy and delusion, or simply ignored. Reality was therefore created to encompass the greater sphere of our existence that covers everything we experience on a day-to-day basis. And while we may create things within our circle of influence, it is largely ignored in the greater arena until it gains enough attention to be noticed by the authority, where it is either accepted or rejected based on its evaluation. But should that attention be in a form of extreme notoriety or negativity, then that same authority will ensure that the thing, whatever it may be, disappears from existence, which is exactly what we see every day. However, because reality, like the matrix, is artificial rather than a natural process, which utilizes deception that ultimately prevents us having any input or control, then our existence within it is not real. It's nothing more than an illusion. But they're just words, right?
No! It's like I've just been dreaming this life, and when I finally wake up, I'll be somebody else. Somebody totally different.
You saw something, didn't you, Eddie? Something to do with the case.
There is no case. There never was. It's all just a big joke. It's a joke.
Words form the basis of both written and verbal communication. They're like magic, not because they're used in some sort of ritualistic spell, but because, like all good tricks produced by illusionists, they apparently appear out of thin air. Ever created a word? More importantly, ever had a word accepted into reality? Yet we have thousands upon thousands, all categorized, alphabetized, and defined just waiting to be used, which all take specific thought, design, and purpose in their creation. No accident, no coincidence. So, who was important enough not only to have created those words, but somehow also managed to have them adopted and accepted by authority and reality? That's right, no one. Out of all those thousands and thousands, only a few can be traced back to an individual source. Everything else, according to some form of unidentified expert, can only be traced to various places and time of origin, which means no one knows. And more importantly, no one can actually prove any of their claims. Most words, according to the experts, originate in the distant past, at a time when travel over any great distance was nearly impossible, and where long-distance communication simply did not exist. Yet entire regions are supposed to have developed and shared the same descriptive language, with a bare minimum of contact, and to such a degree that those words and their meaning became the exact same. On a global scale, separated by vast distances, different languages and different dialects, we find the exact same, when any such occurrence would mean organization and control on a vast scale. Basically, they can make up whatever they want, and we accept their word simply because they're supposed to be expert authorities. And there's the magic, or should that be illusion? There is no factual proof or claim. And any claim made by anyone, regardless of who they are, requires proof, as anything without proof is simply a leap of faith, with no basis of any credibility except that which we ourselves lend to it. We do not create words, and we do not give words definition or meaning. Someone else does. It is the authority, as the author, that creates words, and we lend our faith in their credibility within their version of reality. However, the magical connotation of words is no accident, nor is the fact that the word spell has two separate definitions. The first as a breaking down of a word into its component syllables, while the second relates to a method of using specific words and syllables to incant magic, especially when considering that this reality is created by an author rather than an architect, who specifically uses words to create narrative while enchanting and influencing reality under their own particular spell. So perhaps words aren't so insignificant after all, because those attached definitions, set in stone, so to speak, are the rules by which they are then applied in reality. So that, for example, when we use the word authority, which is derived and adapted from author, we can be sure that they consider the former with its ITY designation to be a physical manifestation of the latter creative prefix, just like reality is the physical manifestation of the word real. In comparison with the Matrix, the architect, as an author, creates agents who become the ultimate authority, but maintain and ruthlessly uphold the status quo. While in this reality, and perhaps not quite so glamorously, the author created a whole laborious structure under various banners of greater and lesser authority to control and manipulate our existence. Definitions and their meaning are therefore also basic commands that direct us in how to use them, so that when we see something like the word blue, it literally means the color blue, and nothing else, not red, nor green, or any other color, despite the fact it has many different hues. And although we are free to call it whatever we want, or replace the color with any other, reality will certainly not allow or accept any other adaptation unless it comes from the author. We should therefore always be very aware of any word and their use, because even though they may appear innocuous, just like those used in magical incantations, when applied in particular sequences and circumstances, they can form a literal minefield of tricks, especially where legal issues are concerned, as they will purposely redefine words in a completely different form, like those we find in legalese and legislation, specifically geared to deceive and confuse. So, we must tread very carefully within the world of words, as we'll never quite be sure what we're actually going to step on.
So who is in control? Huh? Are you? Am I? The guards outside? The warden in his office? Yeah? Who's in control? Testing, testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Dr. Ethan Powell interviewing Dr. Theo Corder. Now, this will be a very simple test. Pass or fail, life or death. You ready, Joe? Now, you write on this paper what I have taken from you. What have you lost? Write it! Write it! Wrong! You never had control. You only thought you had it. An illusion, tapis bourgeois. And what do you control? For sure, huh? The volume in your stereo, the air conditioning in your car? What else? What else? All right. Another chance. You were nervous. Too much pressure. Try again. What have you lost? What did I take? Write it. Write it! You're a fool, Juha. Do you think you were free? Where were you going at 2 o'clock today? Into the gym, right? In the morning, your wake-up call. In the middle of the night when you wake up sweating with your heart pounding. What is it that has you all tied up, Juha? Tied up in little knots? Is it ambition? Yeah. You're no mystery to me, boy. I used to be you. Okay. One last chance. You think I won't do it? That's one psychiatrist less to the world. I'm already deep in the pit, so what can they do to me? Last try. Get it right. What have you lost? What did I take from you? Write it. Yeah. Congratulations. You're a student after all. And you've lost nothing but your illusions and a little bit of skin.
The author, scriptwriter, and playwright use words to paint flourish descriptive images of places, characters, atmosphere, mood, and emotions to draw the reader into their created version of reality. Their exclusive two-dimensional concepts turn from black and white into elaborate three-dimensional manifestations for the mind, television, movies, and the stage. Whereas the audience or reader knows they are merely experiencing an imaginary literary or movie world, the authority's creation is intended to make them believe that their existence in the here and now is real, or at least as real as the current reality allows for. And just like the machine mind in the Matrix, they've gone to great lengths to achieve this specific end. Words, therefore, not only have the power to create specific images in our minds, but can also conjure up the reverse when viewing objects by instantly producing specific words and definitions to match those images, and all without us even realizing what's happening. And it doesn't just have to be sight. It works the same with all the senses. Sound, taste, touch, and smell, as our mind searches for the nearest identifiable equivalent, where it matches the particular sense with the appropriate descriptive word. And if none can be found, the imagination will make it up. It's automatic. With the introduction of real and reality into our belief system, we become conditioned into instantly accepting anything using the same terminology, especially when backed by alleged expert authority or majority opinion. In this way, all else is brought into question or dismissed. And where those questions do arise, we search for corroboration through strength of numbers, so as to validate any growing suspicion, especially where an existing belief has become challenged and a new one forms in its place, but will go into belief later, as the authority itself is the one that decides what does and does not fall into the real and unreal categories. They will go to great lengths to protect their designs and agendas to maintain the status quo. And just like any author, everything they create is black and white, with no grey areas. These creations, despite having the appearance of 3 dimensions, are 2-dimensional black and white fabricated representation. So they will produce all manner of established tricks in order to dismiss any anomaly that might bring into question any one of their creations or agendas. In this way, they manufacture enough doubt and plausible deniability to allow the authority to discredit and dismiss any materializing challenge. In some instances, actually allowing any forming truth to develop and then transforming it into a more ludicrous scenario so as to push it into the realms of conspiracy theory and lunacy. Add to that the now famous alleged majority counter-opinion, and many will easily dismiss any truth for any form of fabricated lie, rather than face isolation outside of what they believe to be the norm. Although now, a somewhat false sense of strength and security in numbers. Everything in reality, therefore, only exists because the authority allowed its inclusion. And we know this to be true because all else is either changed, forced to comply, discredited, dismissed, attacked, ridiculed, or ignored, and relegated into the realms of fiction, myth, conspiracy, and delusion. With the use of the negative prefix "com", the phrase is automatically set in the mindset as something unpleasant and immediately dismissive. In this way, the authority transforms conspiracy theory into an anti-establishment ideology. The fact all sciences, maths and medicine are heavily based on unproven theory, and therefore no less valid, is diminished by the preceding conspiracy. And we see these things all the time without barely a second thought. Remember, words are carefully engineered, not thrown together in any haphazard manner. So there is always a good reason for their appearance in reality. This is but one of the hidden powers of words. Coincidence? Both phrases indicating a form of trap or snare, while we are led to believe that the web is free of manipulation and influence.
It's all true. It's all real. Nothing here is fake. Nothing you see on this show is fake. It's merely controlled.
How much of what we know is true? 100%? 50%? 25%? How about less than 10%? Okay, so let's rephrase the question. How much of what we know can we verify for ourselves? Are we getting nearer that 10% now? The only things we can verify with certainty are those things we experience ourselves. Everything else is nothing more than speculation, and must remain in doubt until someone presents proof. Almost everything we know is presented to us by someone else, with very little gain from personal experience. In the beginning, as a child, it is our parents and relatives who impart their wisdom. Later on, it is school and its teachers who allegedly educate us. Then there's higher education and college, and all the while, the media impress upon us all their own values. Oh, and let's not forget the internet. Snag is, where did they get their information? It would appear that information is therefore something that is shaped and molded by those holding it. So, if information is held by someone, who is it that possesses and distributes this data? That's right, and it comes from the exact same place as everyone else's information, from various expert authorities. And if you can control and manipulate information, you can effectively control and manipulate those receiving it. Parents, relatives, friends, teachers, lecturers, scientists, historians, and politicians. Everyone was indoctrinated into the same system from birth. We all believe that we understand what reality is. We also believe that despite each having individual lives, reality is the same for everyone. It is not. Everyone views reality differently. This is due in part to a thing called relativity. Einstein may have been a genius, but he was also somewhat of a comedian, or at the very least, having a good laugh at our expense. He is, of course, the father of relativity. Yet, when he came up with his theory, he wasn't just formulating a means of calculating mass and energy. He was redefining an older concept known as perspective, where belief, personal experience, prejudice and bias can affect how an individual views objects, people, events and places in combination with spatial time. We are all different, therefore no two individuals can experience the exact same. However, we must also remember that relativity is merely a theory, and although Einstein's calculations verify his own mathematical equation, it does not prove anything else, as 2 plus 2 will always equal 4, no matter the initial question. Yet, in his own complex way, he is scientifically acknowledging that relativity is how personal bias and circumstances interpret and translates what an individual perceives and experiences when viewing reality. Granted, for all intent and purpose, the overall illusory backdrop of reality appears the same, but our individual analysis of the smaller detail remains separate. This difference can be affected by many factors: location, social hierarchy, indoctrination, exterior influence, mental disorders, religion, prejudice, and of course bias. And these are but a few among many, all of which can and do combine to create an overall alternative personal view of reality. Reality is therefore a word that magically appeared so as to define our existence, when by their own definition it is nothing more than an illusion to trick us into believing that reality is of our own making. Yet, in doing so, it establishes 2 important criteria. The first, making all else unreal, and secondly, determining a concrete foundation upon which all mankind views and believes their existence to be, or not to be. Now that is the question, as Shakespeare allegedly once wrote. In this way, reality teaches us to be good, or at the very least what passes for good in the current reality. To obtain education, find employment, earn money, pay taxes, buy goods and services, find a partner or partners, get married, and somewhere along those lines reproduce so the next generation can repeat the whole process over and over, again and again and again. As only that which is acknowledged and verified by authority can exist in reality, there would have to be a means to gain that acceptance. This is done at birth through the method of application, submission, and birth registration. Upon which the new entity receives a certificate and a lifetime membership into whatever cultural backdrop they eventually find themselves. So we must first beg and then immediately yield, so that the authority may consider us worthy of acceptance into their reality. Or at least our parents do, in order for the child to be entered into the logbook of real and unreal. But in doing so, it turns a living, breathing human being into a two-dimensional character known as a person.
I see. It's a helpful unit.
Good. Because for a minute there, I thought we were talking about a fucking mask!
Only two-dimensional characters in the form of the birth registered name or person can interact within reality's bureaucracy, agreements, contracts, and law. And the reason we must always provide the name as identity when questioned by authority. And this applies regardless of color, gender, religion, nationality, class, or status, as we are all members of the authority's reality club, known as society, which binds us with its rules, regulations, and laws, regardless of whether we agree or not. In return, we receive all the rights, privileges, and protection that the authority deems available, but may also make whatever changes as and when it wants to suit their own purpose. However, there is one last acknowledgement, and this comes later with age, in the guise of a benefit, known as a Social Security or National Insurance number, a series of letters and numbers not as yet tattooed on our bodies, but accepted without question and worn and used in a not too dissimilar manner. From there on, the human being becomes secondary to the two-dimensional character, who wears the fictional person just like an invisible jacket, and which sets the stage for the following roles we each play thereafter.
You know, I know this steak doesn't exist. I know that when I put it in my mouth, the Matrix is telling my brain that it is juicy and delicious. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss.
Then we have a deal.
I don't want to remember nothing. Nothing. You understand? And I want to be rich. You know, someone important. Like an actor.
Whatever you want, Mr. Regan.
All the world's a stage. and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages.
So what is an actor? We all have our favorites, yet we all assume they're special people who work on the stage, television, and in movies. But that's not strictly true. Are we beginning to see a pattern? It's as if someone or thing has gone to great lengths not only to have turned us into two-dimensional characters, but also transformed everything we do into a form of unofficial acting role. Which means that there has to be some form of script. But we'll leave that particular concept for now and concentrate on acting and roles. Is it possible we're all unwitting actors, playing parts in some form of script? Well, when an actor takes on a role, they become a different character as defined in the script. And while it can be argued that many actors are simply playing themselves, they are still altering their characters to fit the role created for them. Yet, even before they stepped into the limelight, they had already adopted the character of a celebrity. And before that, adopted the character of the person or persons they were before becoming an actor.
I can assure you I mean you no harm.
Who are you?
Who is but the form following the function of what, and what I am is a man in a mask.
Well, I can see that.
Of course you can. I'm not questioning your powers of observation. I'm merely remarking upon the paradox of asking a masked man who he is.
Oh, right.
Who is but the form following the function of what. Therefore, whatever role we play in reality is far more important than who we actually are.
One of America's most prestigious academic institutions, and in 1971, the scene of one of the most notorious experiments in the history of psychology.
I was interested in what happens if you put good people in an evil place. Does the situation outside of you, the institution, come to control your behavior, or does the things inside of you, your attitudes, your values, your morality, allow you to rise above a negative environment?
The negative environment Zimbardo chose to test his ideas was a prison. He would convert the basement of the university's psychology department into a subterranean jail.
We put prison doors on each of 3 office cells. In the cells, there was nothing but 3 beds, and there was actually very little room, if anything else, because they were very small. And here we had solitary confinement, which we call the hole. And in the hole was the place where prisoners would be put for punishment. It was a very, very small area. When you closed the door, it was totally dark. All the guards wore military uniforms, and we had them wear these silver reflecting sunglasses. And what it does is you can't see someone's eyes, and so that loses some of the humanness, the humanity. In general, we wanted to create a sense of power. That is, the guards as a category are people who have power over others, in this case, power over the prisoners.
A decade earlier, Psychologist Stanley Milgram had also looked at how we respond to authority. In order to understand how people were induced to obey unjust regimes and participate in atrocities such as the Holocaust, he set up an experiment. Volunteers were told they were taking part in scientific research to improve memory.
Would you open those and tell me which of you is which, please? Teacher. Where? Teacher.
Separated by a screen, the teacher would ask the learner questions in a word game and administer an electric shock when the answer was incorrect. He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
Cloud. Horse. Rock. House. Answer. Wrong. 150 volts. Answer. Horse.
Oh. Experiment. That's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right on.
I refuse to go on. Let me out.
He refuses to go on. The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor and the so-called shocks harmless.
You're gonna get a shock. 180 volts.
Oh. I can't stand the pain. Let me out of
I
here.
can't stand it. I'm not gonna kill that man there. I mean, who's gonna take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman? I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please. All right, next one. Slow. Walk, dance, truck, music.
Two-thirds of volunteers were prepared to administer a potentially fatal electric shock when encouraged to do so by what they perceived as a legitimate authority figure. In this case, a man in a white coat.
375 volts. I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I don't get no answer. He was hollering with less voltage. Can't you check in and see if he's all right, please?
Milgram's findings horrified America. They showed that decent American citizens were as capable of committing acts against their conscience as the Germans had been under the Nazis. Like Milgram, Zimbardo was interested in the power of social situations to overwhelm individuals. His experiment would test people's responses to an oppressive regime. Would they accept it or act against it? Zimbardo's experiment was conducted against a backdrop of civil rights activism and protest against the Vietnam War.
There was a sense of student power, student dominance, and student rebellion against authority in general.
It was from the student body that Zimbardo selected his participants. After passing tests to screen out anyone with a psychological abnormality, they were paid $15 a day. Each was randomly assigned to the role of guard or prisoner.
Once you put a uniform on and are given a job to keep these people in line, you really become that person. Once you put on that khaki uniform, you put on the glasses, you take the nightstick.
As well as running the experiment, Zimbardo took on the role of prison superintendent. He began by briefing the guards.
I said, you have to maintain law and order. If prisoners escape, the study is over, and you can't use physical violence.
You can create a sense of fear in them. You can create the notion that their life is totally controlled by us, and that there'll be constant surveillance. We have total power in the situation, and they have none.
Prisoners were brought to the basement prison, blindfolded, to confuse them about their whereabouts. They were stripped and deloused.
Of course, the guards started making fun of their genitals and humiliating them. And really, it's a start of what's known as the degradation process, which not only prisons, but lots of military-type outfits use that process. The first day, I said, this might be a very long, very boring experiment, because it's conceivable nothing will happen.
I arrived independently at the conclusion that this experiment must have been put together to prove a point about prisons being a cruel and inhumane place, and therefore I would do my part, to help those results come about. I was a confrontational and arrogant 18-year-old at the time, and I said somebody ought to stir things up a bit here.
On the second morning, the prisoners had decided to stir things up as well. The guards found some of them had used their beds to barricade their cell. Prisoner 8612 was one of the ringleaders of the rebellion.
Initially, I was stunned. I didn't expect a rebellion because not much happened. I mean, it wasn't clear what they were rebelling against, but they were rebelling against the status, rebelling against being anonymous, against having to follow orders from these other students.
As punishment for the rebellion, prisoner 8612 was put in the hole, and the guards turned on the other prisoners.
The guards felt that they now have to up the ante of being tough. The prisoners made the mistake of beginning to use profanity against the guards in a very personalized way. So not against the guards, but, you know, you little punk, you big shit, and so, and the guards got furious.
The harassment of the guards took its toll on rebellion leader 8612. He told Zimbardo he wanted to leave the experiment. Zimbardo responded not as a psychologist, but as a prison superintendent.
I said, well, I can see to it the guards don't hassle you personally, and in return, all I would like is some information from time to time about what the prisoners are doing. So essentially I'm saying, I'd like you to be a snitch, an informer. And I said, think it over, and if you still want to leave, fine.
Confused, prisoner 8612 returned to his cell and told the other prisoners that no one could leave.
He believed that we wouldn't let him go, although we've never said that. But the fact that he was the ringleader of the rebellion, and he told the other prisoners, they won't let you leave. And that really transformed the experiment into a prison.
Soon after returning to his cell, prisoner 8612 started showing signs of severe distress.
He came up with a plan that if he acted crazy, we would have to release him. It starts with make-believe, and then he's doing it and cursing and screaming and, you know, whatever that little boundary is that he moved across. Not that he became really crazy, but he became, you know, excessively disturbed. I mean, so much so that we immediately said we have to release him.
The boundary between reality and make-believe was to become blurred even for Zimbardo. A rumor circulated that released prisoner 8612 would return with friends to liberate the remaining prisoners.
I quickly convinced myself that, you know, my most important function was, you know, not to allow this prison liberation to occur. And what could I do to keep my prison going, not the experiment going?
The prison was dismantled and the prisoners moved to another part of the building. Zimbardo waited in the empty corridor, preparing to tell 8612 and his friends that the study was over, when a colleague appeared and began asking questions about the scientific basis of the research.
I'm trying to get rid of him. And then he says, what's the independent variable? I get furious because he doesn't understand that there's a riot about to take place, that this prison is about to erupt. I had totally lost this whole other identity of scientist, researcher, psychologist.
The rumored jailbreak never materialized. The guards had dismantled the prison for nothing and had to rebuild it. They took their frustration out on the prisoners.
They escalated again the level of control, the level of dominance, the level of humiliating behavior.
"819 was the next prisoner to rebel against the harassment of the guards. He barricaded himself in his cell and refused to take part in the count.
You're not only not getting a cigarette, but for as long as the cell's blockaded, you're going to be in solitary when you get out.
For 819's disobedience, the guards made his cellmates do mindless work. This undermined any vestige of solidarity amongst the prisoners, who now chose to accept the tyranny of the guards rather than risk further harassment. Isolated and distraught, prisoner 819 told Zimbardo he wanted to leave.
While I'm interviewing 819 and saying, okay, you know, it's all over, thank you for your participation, you know, I'll give you money for the whole 2 weeks, even though you're leaving early, he hears the prisoners shouting, 819 did a bad thing.
Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing.
And he said, I can't leave. And he's crying. And he says, I can't leave. I said, what do you mean you can't leave? He said, no, I have to go back because I don't want them to think, you know, that I'm a bad prisoner. And that's when I really flipped out. That in such a short time, you know, a college student's thinking could become so distorted. I said, You're not a bad prisoner. You're not a prisoner. And this is not a prison. And it was this thing where he opened his eyes, and it was just really like a cloud being lifted.
Seeing things clearly, prisoner 819 reverted to his original request and was released. To replace him, the experimenters called in one of their reserves from the standby list.
He came into a madhouse, full blown. All of us had gradually acclimated to the increasing level of aggression, the increasing powerlessness of the prisoners, the increasing dominance of the guards. And he comes in and says, "What's happening here to the other prisoners?" And they said, "Yeah, you better not make trouble. It's really terrible. It's a real prison." And he says, "I'm out of here. I don't want to." And they said, "No, they're not, you can't leave. Once you're here, you're stuck. This is a real prison."
Prisoner 416 was soon subjected to the harassment of Dave Eshelman, nicknamed John Wayne because of his macho attitude.
He was creative in his evil. He would think up very ingenious ways to degrade, to demean the prisoners. One of the best guards was also on that shift, and instead of confronting this bad guard, the sadistic guard, essentially because he didn't want to see what was happening, he became the gopher. He would go out to get the food and things of this kind, and that left the John Wayne guard and another guard on that shift to be dominant.
Prisoner 416 decided to go on a hunger strike. Frustrated by his continued defiance, John Wayne threw prisoner 416 into the hole. After punishing the other prisoners for his disobedience, John Wayne encouraged them to vent their anger at 416 directly.
416 should have been at some level a hero, because he's willing to oppose the authority of the system. In fact, the prisoners accept the guard's definition of him as a troublemaker.
While 416 was still in the hole, John Wayne made a final attempt to break him by giving his fellow prisoners a choice. They could vote to release him by making a small sacrifice.
You can give me the blankets and sleep on the bare mattress, or you can keep your blankets and 416 will stay in another day. Now what would it be?
Wait! You could die. At least tell me your name.
It's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me.
Bruce?
What the Stanford experiment shows is that we ultimately become the characters in whatever role we play, but can adjust almost immediately when and if that role suddenly changes, and without even being aware of any alteration. As life progresses and we experience more, we change from the initial character and evolve. But mixed among the evolution of those larger roles are smaller performances we enact to serve specific, more immediate scenes in our lives. When a lover meets their partner, they take on the character of a lover, whose role matches those expectations they believe their partner finds most attractive and appealing, to such a degree that we dress up in costumes and use makeup to make us more attractive and disguise certain aspects of our true identity. And it is only when the two finally get to know one another better that the true character of each begin to show through. The same for the employee trying to win over their employer, the accused in court before the judge, the politician facing their electorate, the child who didn't do anything wrong, or the husband or wife hiding their affair. These are mere momentary roles, as are everything we do within our existence. It's just that for some of us, it comes easier than it does for others. But we all do it for whatever various reasons. After all, who among us truly knows who they really are beneath the mask they see in the mirror every day? And given a completely alternate set of circumstances and environment, what differences would we perceive in the overall character when compared to that of today? With every possible occupation, trade, and profession already mapped long before we arrive, and our direction and decisions early on specifically manufactured to lead us into precise roles based on environment, location, status and social background as defined by the script. It does not mean that someone may not rise up their station, but for such things to occur, it requires some form of speciality, determination, or aptitude outside of the normal environment before reality takes notice and makes the necessary subsequent arrangements. But contrary to belief, we are not bankers, shop assistants, refuse collectors, or bricklayers. They simply mask and hide our true character, and probably the reason so many become lost in their quest to find their true identity. No, the roles of this reality are merely requirements needed to maintain and build the infrastructure of its physical world, without which there could be no reality. Secondly, it ties us to a 9-to-5 mentality, with our lives largely occupied with the problems of earning enough to pay the mounting bills and keep us living in the style we have become accustomed. There is little time for anything else, save for perhaps those professional actors or sports celebrities that we worship and watch on television and the movies, specifically geared to distract us further from the elephant sitting in the middle of the room. Whether we believe we're actors or not makes little difference, because reality has gone to great lengths to define a person who is also a character, a mask, and an actor. It has made every possible move we make an action or performance, and every activity we undertake a role. Actor, action, activity, performance, role. The facts are undeniable. No accident, no coincidence. So what is an expert authority? Currently, there are two accepted ideologies. The first is someone who has spent more than 10,000 hours working on a particular field or subject. Using this method makes most of us expert workers, drivers, cooks, homemakers, media and sports consultants, along with every other thing we spend over 10,000 hours working with. However, it does create some very talented individuals who have become very skilled at their crafts. The second official definition is someone who has spent time reading books and listening to other alleged experts in universities or college, and then set an exam where they were required to remember at least 50% of what they had just learned, in order to obtain an authorized piece of paper declaring them qualified in whatever particular field or subject they just studied. There are several problems with this ideology, especially when considering that 1. They are only qualified as someone with a better than average memory, and 2. That their whole qualification is totally based and reliant on whether the source material they used is actually up to date, accurate and factual. And as most of this material they rely on also came from similar books who were written by other experts that qualified in exactly the same way, over time this information can become more of a Chinese whisper rather than actual fact, the further down the line we travel. But as no one dare challenge the official narrative, then we have no real way of knowing how much of that information has become corrupted or manipulated over the course of time. This does not mean that there are not some very clever individuals out there responsible for our technological advances, but these people use empirical science to observe and to test, so as to verify their findings and create a final product. However, it also creates large groups of individuals who use nothing more than faith and imagination to push their theories onto a somewhat naive and gullible public, pretty much like a used car salesman. So the fact is, an expert authority is no more of an expert than anyone else, save for a glorified piece of paper or some form of elaborate initials after their name. But what actually gives these types of used car salesmen their credibility and their necessary status is the addition of the subsequent literal word of authority behind them. And as we all know, there are no shortage of experts according to the definition. Most of the time, we never get to hear about the person behind a discovery, usually hidden under the corporate logo pushing its latest product. Either that, or they're simply used as imaginary figures with claims of unidentified, unspecified numbers to back up some new agenda or doctrine. After all, who can possibly doubt the word of a dozen, possibly hundreds of unknown, unidentified experts? They can't all possibly be wrong, right? Yet surprisingly, thousands of ordinary people can declare it wrong to wage illegal wars, and no one takes a blind bit of notice. However, on those few rare occasions they do wheel out a select few of these experts and parade them before us mere mortals. Their intention is purely to put a human face to whatever new claim has appeared in the script. And this is where and when we discover that it isn't actually what these experts know, but rather who they are and who is supporting them that has elevated them to celebrity status. We've already seen how words are used to embed subliminal command structures. By parading out these people and qualifying them as expert authorities, we are similarly conditioned into accepting their face with their specific field of alleged expertise. But as we have also seen, they are merely actors, following specific scripts and attempting to sell us a new ideology given to them by whatever authority is backing them. These then become enablers. Their job? Simply to make us ready to accept whatever new sales pitch is about to be presented to us. And we've seen many throughout time, such as those from Greece and Rome, the likes of Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, Edison, Darwin, Huxley, Orwell, Einstein, and a more recent Hawkins, introducing all manner of concepts like atoms, evolution, holes in the ozone, global warming, bird flu, terrorist threats, relativity, improbable space programs, aliens, new galactic discoveries, experimental drugs and treatments, quarks, quantums, string theory, multiverses, and the possibility of it all being a virtual reality. And this is where scientism lies.